to like my counselor and they'll be like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it's like, I want to do art. And they're like, well, that's a really hard thing to do. You should really go to school for something else, and maybe that's like a side hobby or something, right?
We've been called a lot of things. And we're inspired by everything around us, including each other. The individuals that have inspired me the most create beauty and positive change. To me, that's the highest form of art, and it deserves the loudest praise. This is Shout Out, the art of self-expression. On this episode of Shout Out, the art director and 3D character designer, Hart.
Realizing what kind of storytelling was possible in games that kind of transitioned from, I want to make movies, to wait, no, actually, I want to make these awesome games and be a part of this emerging space. We did the Kickstarter back in like 2015. So we were like a super small team and we built a pitch and this idea around Crowfall, and we ended up like crushing our goal. I think for like a year straight, I didn't do any digital art. I just did photography and had a blast and learned a ton. When I came back to digital art, not only did I feel refreshed, but I had a whole new way to view digital art. I'm thinking about like the focal length now. I'm thinking about like the lighting, like all these things that we know about in games, but I think having more of the physical, technical understanding of what that means, like, you grow a taste. I still love making art, and I spend a lot of my free time making art. And so I kind of see myself going from being an art director, going back into more of a creator role, maybe going back to being an art director and going back and forth.
Welcome to the show, Hart. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to talk to you and hang out for a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you being here. I kind of want to just jump back to the beginning. I've known you for a little bit here, and I've known you, to be an amazing artist, but I kind of caught you midway through. Let's jump back to the beginning. Where did this all begin for you?
Oh man, it's such a big question, but art in general goes all the way back to, when I was a kid, 5 years old, 6 years old, drawing and just really loving the idea of creating stuff and creating my own characters and watching cartoons and stuff, right? And being like, oh man, that character's so dope. I want to make my own or draw those. And which, is funny because I feel like that's been a bane of, like, to this day, I still do way too much fan art, I feel like, rather than like my own stuff. I love just like picking an IP and like doing fan art of that thing. But that's besides the point. But yeah, as I was growing up, I feel like I was just of the like demographic where people didn't really realize the amount of creative jobs there were going to be in the 2010s and 2020s and where we're at now. And so I remember being in like high school and stuff and going to like my counselor, and they'd be like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it's like, I want to do art. And they're like, well, that's a really hard thing to do. You should really go to school for something else, and maybe that's like a side hobby or something, right? And so through high school, I was like trying to figure out what I want to do, and I eventually decided I was going to join the Air Force, and I wanted to actually go to the Air Force Academy where you like go to train to become an officer and stuff, and had to take all these tests and get like letters of recommendations. And towards the end of that process, I realized that due to the nature of my eyes, I would never be able to fly or even have the opportunity to fly like an aircraft. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go through 8 years of the Air Force if I don't even at least get the small sliver of a chance to be able to do that. And as I was kind of coming to the realization that that wasn't going to be a possibility, I stumbled on Full Sail, and I was like, whoa, this is awesome. Like you can go to school for computer animation, and this is really interesting. And it all kind of clicked. And, it was like a 2 or 3 month decision from my senior year of high school to go into Full Sail, where it was like, this is what I'm going to do. And, that's just kind of how I got into it. And from there, it's just been meeting amazing people and getting the opportunity to work on a lot of cool stuff and um, really just enjoying a career in the gaming industry.
And you had mentioned, kind of being sucked into the whole of fan art and not
Yeah.
creating as much of your own. Um, what kind of shows were you inspired by, or movies, cartoons, games?
Ninja Turtles big time. Like I had Ninja Turtle VHSs just on repeat, um, just nonstop, always watching that stuff. And then even earlier than that, one of the or even before like Disney movies and stuff, Brave Little Toaster was a movie that like really resonated with me as a child, and at the time I didn't really know why, but now I kind of think back to where I ended up in 3D and this kind of like emerging digital space. Like that movie back then was pushing so many boundaries for film, like mixing a lot of new technologies and um, I think it captivated me in a way that I didn't realize until I was an adult. And then like Toy Story and all the early 3D films, of course. But I also started gaming super early. Like I got a Super Nintendo when I was like 3 or 4. Um, and I think my first game ever was Mortal Kombat. Like my dad brought home a Super Nintendo and Mortal Kombat, and we played that game together for like 2 weeks straight. And I mean, I would like draw Scorpion and Sub Zero just on repeat because I was into karate and Mortal Kombat was cool, and I was like, this is amazing. So stuff like that.
As you were actually working out the kinks and like getting your own career going, um, anything change for you, or was it pretty much you're still kind of pulling on those old inspirations?
I think it's interesting because I went into Full Sail probably a lot like you, not entirely knowing what to expect and where that was going to lead me. And at the time, Full Sail was a computer animation course with the thought like, oh, you're going to go work on films after. So I went into Full Sail not really thinking, oh, I'm going to end up in the games industry. It wasn't really even on my mind. That wasn't until after when we graduated and I ended up in Austin and I realized there was all game studios here. But um, I think uh, really my influences and my inspiration just kind of shifted more from movies to games as I got older. Especially being a teenager, I feel like with such early 2000s 360 era was such an awesome era for gaming where you had like Mass Effect and Gears of War and World of Warcraft and all these like tons and tons of new IPs with really good graphics and really good stories and narratives, and realizing what kind of storytelling was possible in games that wasn't really there in the generation prior. I was like really inspired to want to begin working in that kind of stuff. And so over the course of Full Sail, it kind of transitioned from I want to make movies to wait, no, actually, I want to make these awesome games and be a part of this emerging space. I've been at the same place for 7 years now. I want to say it's been a long time, and we actually just got purchased. So I was at a company called Artcraft Entertainment, and we make a game called Crowfall, which was actually a Kickstarter game. So we did the Kickstarter back in like 2015 when Kickstarter was like really hot for games and stuff. And so we were like a super small team, and we built a pitch and this idea around Crowfall, and we ended up like crushing our goal, and got a lot of hype and interest around Crowfall and stuff. And so I started as a character artist on Crowfall and moved up into an art director position by the end of it, which is where I'm at right now. And so we're just kind of working on Crowfall and improving it and adding new features. And uh, yeah, it's been pretty cool because we've always been a pretty small team. We're like 50 to 70 people. We kind of like fluctuate between that range, so like small to medium. So there's a lot of conversation and a lot of intermingling between people and ideas and stuff. Whereas like at a really big company, you kind of just become another number. So it's been cool. It's kind of I've found over the years my sweet spot is like smaller to medium sized studios. It's just kind of where I thrive and where I like to be. But it's been pretty cool. Yeah.
how do the creative meetings work in kind of like a small team environment?
Um, it changes for sure, but there's usually an overall uh vision for what the milestone is or where the game is going or what the goal is. And once each department, engineering, design, and art, is kind of clear on what those goals are, it's up to those departments to then figure out how to tackle their piece of that pie, right? So if it's art and we're like, oh, we're going to add um, this new feature, and this new feature needs some new zones where the players can run around in. So that means we need these kind of areas, maybe like forests or swamps or something, and then we kind of just figure out the high level and then break it down to smaller and smaller chunks until it's actually actionable tasks. And then we just kind of make sure that those tasks are going to the people that feel like they're best suited for those things. So it's always changing and always evolving. And especially working from home, I feel like every studio and every creative organization on the planet is going through growing pains trying to figure out how to handle those meetings. Because you've gone from so much information being passively obtained, just by being in the pit and hearing two designers talk, and you hear that conversation. Whereas now, conversation is much more deliberate and it's like sought out after. And so, trying to figure out what the balance is between making sure people understand what's going on and not over communicating where it feels like it's overbearing is kind of the thing that I've been thinking a lot about as a manager over the past year or two, couple of years now. But yeah, it's a really big challenge, I think.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of challenges, what were some of the challenges kind of going from a designer role to where you're at right now, where you're leading a team?
Um, there's tons. There's absolutely tons. I think the biggest thing has been putting empathy first before everything else. When I was just an artist, uh, I would see other people not working as hard or slacking off, and I'd be like super angry and be like, "What do you do? Like, why am I working so hard?" Like, you kind of get like an attitude, and you can kind of you get in your zone and your piece, and you don't have to be uh, as polite. But as I've had to work more and more with people and interact with more people, for me, it's really been focusing on understanding what other people need and what helps them thrive. So I never try to like push a certain style of work or management on people. It's always like, hey, what works best for you? Like, do you want to meet every Tuesday at a certain time? Do you just want to hit me up when you need some conversation or you need to talk something through? So, one of the benefits of being on a smaller team is it can kind of have more of like a personal touch with different folks, right? So, kind of finding what works for each person. But also at the end of the day, just doing a lot more listening than talking, right? And just trying to learn and just take in what everyone's saying so that I can kind of do my best to pave the way and keep roadblocks out of the way of people actually getting work done. So it's challenge and it's a learning process. Like you never can stop learning.
Do you feel like, your interest, your study of story and character, has that helped you kind of identify certain roles or certain characters within the group that you're working in?
Um, I don't know honestly, because even though my background is a character artist, it really hasn't been until the past couple of years where I've started to really think more about narrative and storytelling beyond just like the visual.
Mhm.
Um, and part of that's because my interests have expanded. I've become a lot more interested in cinematography and other things, and by nature, that you start to kind of think more about narrative and stuff. But uh, in terms of identifying like personalities, that's hard to say. I think that just comes from listening and uh, just seeing how people interact and that sort of thing.
Little odd question here. If your life was a movie,
Okay.
what would the theme song be and why?
Oh God, dude. I feel like through 2020 it would have been like the Benny Hill theme. So just like because it just felt like I was always trying to get ahead. Like, trying to adjust from working from home full time. We were trying to ship Crowfall. It was just like an endless bucket of things to do, and then I just kind of felt like I was playing catch up nonstop. So like that song is just plays on repeat.
That's a great answer. Where do you see yourself in about 10 years?
Dude, this is a brutal question. So
I know.
so like we shipped Crowfall in the summer of last year, and I've been on Crowfall since late 2014, early 2015. So after we shipped, even now, I've spent a lot of time thinking about like what's next for me. Like it kind of feels like it's time to look for other things and see what else is out there and try new opportunities. And I feel like on a weekly basis, I go from like, okay, I really like helping people and being in the art director role. And um, but then I think about the aspects that I like about it, and it's really more about empowering other people to do their best work. Like I don't like enforcing my will on people. Obviously there's a need to make sure there's a cohesive vision and everyone understands the goal, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like what I think specifically. I always want that to be a collaborative effort. But having said that, it's like one week I'm like, yeah, I really like this art director thing. I could see continuing down this path. And then the next week I'm like, I just want to go back to making art and just doing characters and, making the absolute top notch art that I can make. And then it's, I kind of swing back and forth and back and forth. And um, it's funny when I interview and talk to other companies, they're like, you're in a really weird space because we can't tell if you want to be an art director or just like a principal character artist or senior character artist. And I'm like, I can't tell you that either because like it's so, and I think a lot of people, anyone that has done any kind of management probably feels this way. Um, and maybe a little bit of that is imposter syndrome. I'm not sure, but the bottom line is I still love making art and I spend a lot of my free time making art. Uh, and I think about um, me when from an artist role and the people that I look up to, I like to know that they have skills to back up the position they're in. And so when I'm as an art director and I do less and less work at work, I start to get that like uh just like, oh no, am I like falling behind, right? And so I kind of see myself going from being an art director, going back into more of a creator role to brush up my skills, maybe going back to being an art director and going back and forth. So it's really hard to say exactly where I'll be in 10 years because it's so fluid and it changes so often.
It's a very Bruce Lee answer of you.
Yeah, yeah,
Be
I
like
can see
water,
that.
Eric.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough.
It is tough. What advice would you give to anybody that is looking to kind of follow in your footsteps, of going from a designer position into like an art director position?
Um, it's uh, it's interesting because you kind of need to find a team that's committed to watching you grow and understanding that you have goals and things that you want to achieve. And so some companies aren't just going to be that. And so sometimes it takes just going through a couple different studios and a couple different places to find the right management and the right leaders that care about their people in a way that they want to see them grow and evolve. And I think more people are understanding that because a lot of conversations I have with other managers and other directors and other companies, um, everyone from the onset tries to see like, hey, what path do you want to go down? Like, do you want to go down the art path or do you want to go down the art direction path, or like what are you interested in? And so um, the more companies learn to understand where their employees want to go from the beginning, it's going to make that journey so much better for both parties because as a company, if you're not growing that person in a way that they see themselves, they're going to leave and go somewhere else. And on the other side, if an employee doesn't feel like they're growing into a position that they want, they're going to gain resentment for that company and they're going to leave. Um, so uh, that's a hard one, but uh, overall, I think it's just having a great eye and thinking about more than just what you do, because the industry is so technical and complicated now. We all focus, right? Like I'd focus on character art, but even that's becoming more sub focused, right? There's groom artists, there's material artists, there's fabric artists, right? Like it's almost just not even a character artist anymore when you get up to the highest pedigree of art. uh but uh as a manager too, like I think about when I'm like hiring people, I look at every aspect of what they're showing. So just like if you're an environment artist and you have great environment art, that's awesome. But I also want to see your artistic ability and your eye in your resume design, in your website design, um, in all of your branding. Like I want to see that you're thoughtful in all areas of your presentation. And I think having an eye like that and thinking beyond just the specific niche that you focus on is going to help you develop into more of an art director and more in understanding the greater picture. Um, and as I moved from character art to art direction, most of my time isn't spent thinking about characters anymore because we had a really great character artist kind of fill in that role, and the style is set and he knows what he's doing, and that's kind of it. And so um, you kind of have to really be open to understanding all areas of art, of games, of whatever industry that you're an art director in, whether that's media or fashion or games or film or whatever. But there's no one answer. Everyone gets there from a different path, I think.
What kind of resources are you tapping into or looking into to kind of broaden your skill set or your awareness of art direction in general?
YouTube, for sure. Like, there's so many different things on YouTube, and I'm like a video essay junkie. Like, I love watching like video essays on like games, on film, on photography, cinematography, all that kind of stuff, fashion. So there's a lot of that, and I think too, looking beyond what you focus on specifically. So like, I think in any industry, there's a you tend to hyper focus. So if you're really into games, you look at other games as inspiration, and that's great. But like gaming in particular is still such a young medium, and it's still playing catch up in a lot of ways. So like, if you're thinking about storytelling and narrative, and that's like the type of games you're really interested in making and maybe being a leader on, go look at film, go look at cinematography, like things like that. And I found around, I want to say like 2016 or 2017, when I was kind of getting really burned out of just doing digital art, I was like, I need to get up away from the computer. I'm so sick of going to work, working, and then sitting back down and being like, I got to work on my portfolio. And so I felt stable in my job, and I was like, I need to do something else that's still creative. And so I picked up a camera. I bought my first DSLR and started just shooting with that, and I got really, really into photography. And I think for like a year straight, I didn't do any digital art. I just did photography, and had a blast and learned a ton from like YouTube creators like Peter McKinnon and Maddie Hapoya, and just like these guys that are like awesome resources for learning, and just got really, really into that. And then when I came back to digital art, not only did I feel refreshed, but I had a whole new way to view digital art. Like now, when I think about characters now, or like say I have a character and I need to take some screenshots to present him, I'm thinking about like the focal length now. I'm thinking about like the lighting, like all these things that we know about in games, But I think having more of the physical, technical understanding of what that means, like how does a 50 millimeter lens change a portrait subject versus an 85? And when I was really into photography, I gained preference, like I gained lenses and stuff that I like more. Like I was really into 50 for a while, and then right now I'm really into 35 millimeter lenses. Like so, you grow a taste. And when I was only doing digital stuff, I played with the focal length slider, but I was like, I just was like, that looks good. But now I think about it very deliberate, and I'm never going to choose like 76 or 42. Like I'm always going to choose a prime number because
Yeah.
my understanding now is in photography. And um, even and same goes for motion and videography and cinematography, like understanding your different kind of pans and transitions. And uh like instead of just doing fly throughs and having cameras in your world that are just not hooked up to anything, actually thinking about how that camera would physically be in this space is going to make your art and your subject so much more convincing beyond just having a camera and keyframing it here and then keyframing it there and calling it good. So like thinking more about that stuff really broadens your horizons, I think. So just being open to all the different creative mediums, not just the one that you're focused on.
Is there anything that you're doing right now that's like outside of art, has nothing to do with art, that kind of recharges you in a different way?
Yeah, baking is one for sure. At the start of the pandemic, I was like, I wanted to get into something, and I think a lot of people did. And there's a local bakery here in Austin called Easy Tiger, and I got some of their sourdough starter. And I think in like 2 weeks, I baked like 20 loaves of sourdough. They were like flat and terrible. And eventually I started to get the hang of it. And since then, I've gotten really, really into sourdough and understanding like the baker's math of it and stuff. And I have a sourdough starter that I keep on the kitchen counter that I feed every day that I've had since March 2020, which is, pretty cool. So that's one for sure. And then before the pandemic, I was taking photography and applying it to I was doing a lot of like pet and foster photography, like doing photography for pets up for adoption and stuff like that. And I haven't really done it since the pandemic started, but that's something I want to get back to. And that was a really nice, like, feeling like I'm doing something that's helping the community, but also still applying, some creative flair to it. So that was a lot of fun to do.
Anybody that you'd want to give a shout out to?
Oh man, I mean, I was checking out some of your earlier videos, and I feel like I just want to shout out all them guys, like Brian. Like,
Yeah.
like I lived with Brian for a little while, and he gave me a huge opportunity at a pivotal moment, in my life when I was trying to figure things out. And he's always been a homie. But yeah, I mean, just everyone that's helped me along the way. A lot of our peers from Full Sail that I still keep in touch with. Like I talk to Chip once in a while, and he's doing well. And
Well, thanks again for coming on and doing this, dude. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, dude.
Shout Out is an Ellering Stories production. For more episodes, visit elleringstories.com.